So, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm very glad to be here with you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for your time to listen to me. I'm Ana. I am originally from Brazil, but I live in France. It's been 3 years now. And I have been working with AI governance, AI and ethics, also as a lawyer trying to interpret the new EU-AI Act. And I'm also a resident philosopher at the AI Collective. I'm doing a PhD at this moment and writing a thesis about emotional data and emotional AI. And this is what I would like to discuss with you tonight so that we can provoke our thoughts. I'm not going to bring all the answers, but I'm going to provoke the reflection. Thank you. So I would like to do a quick exercise with everyone tonight. Let's read some headings of newspapers from 2036. And you will tell me afterwards if you think this is very unlikely to happen, likely to happen, or impossible to happen. Let's read the first one. Replica surpasses Meta and Apple to become world's most valuable tech company. Following legalization of human AI marriages in 14 countries, CEO declares emotional bonds are the next trillion-dollar market. Who is in the team of very unlikely? Raise your hands. Okay, good. Likely. Impossible. Good. I would like to talk to the fellows of the impossible afterwards. Second one. AI-powered toy adjusts personality to match child's emotional state for maximum bonding. Parents report emotional meltdowns when the device is turned off. Very unlikely. Likely. Impossible. Okay then. Interesting. EU mandates AI companion offboarding protocols after investigation into emotional dependency. Under new digital well-being regulation, companies must offer psychological support, gradual disengagement, and structured farewell sessions for users ending long-term relationships with AI companions. Very unlikely. Likely. Impossible.
Very likely.
Okay, so let's come back to this later, because the fact is that many people around the world are already having emotional bonds with AIs. One of the biggest markets for the coming years is the AI companions industry. So what we have here is something very engaging and interesting. You may have heard already of those AIs that are creating bonds with people, in which people, mostly the ones that are feeling lonely or when there are some vulnerabilities there, these people are reaching out to AIs. There are people getting married to AIs, there are people obtaining friendship out of interactions with AIs, that are children and adolescents as well, using the system for emotional support. And these AIs are processing many emotional data, what we are calling, in a certain way, intimate data, and creating bonds with people. So now we enter a different era, an era in which there is an algorithmic intimacy between human and machines. And it's seen in many cases, not only in the media, but also people reporting their feelings and their usage of AI, parents seeking advice from AIs to raise their children, people asking AI if they should break up with their partner or not, and many other types of recommendations that those systems are giving, whilst they are collecting emotional data and also steering people's emotions in a certain way. Why is this so attaching? Because basically, these systems, they are always there for people. They work 24 hours, 7 days a week without judgment. Also, there is a very high level of personalization in these systems that creates a sense of engagement with the users. So it's something very engaging from the point of view of the design. They offer emotional support. There are many users already feeling and reporting these feelings of comfort and care. And some people are using this for identity discovery as well, because the system is capable of inferring many information about the user in a way that it's shaping a certain type of identity. One interesting example as well to mention here is the AI companions that are being used for therapy. There are many people asking for emotional support in crisis scenarios of depression, anxiety, having bonds with these AIs. And here, I saw this image the other day on LinkedIn. I don't know who created this. There was no authorship stated, but I thought it was very illustrative of my thesis. So, there at the top we have what I tell my parents. We go a bit deeper, what I tell my friends. A bit deeper, what I tell my therapist. A bit deeper, what I tell strangers online, especially if you are in an anonymous way, so you tell a lot of things to strangers online. And in the deep bottom, what I tell ChatGPT. And this is true, because people are not afraid to speak up, to open up their feelings and frustrations and desires and ambitions to the future with AIs. This is happening. We see this all over. And this is creating a massive quantity of data that can be read, inferred, and also used to steer people's behaviors, even if people and the regulators are not totally aware of that or are beginning to be now. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest issues here is that we have an AI that is mostly inferential, meaning that AI is capable now of processing all those amazing conversations in which it's giving recommendations to people and inferring many characteristics of these users and patterns in the conversation that can be used for many different purposes. But the point is that AI is not only processing raw data, it's also producing inferences, meaning something new that is concluded or deducted from that initial prompt or conversation. So what we have there are many specific examples of this. So what AI can collect in order to generate those inferences is language patterns in a chat, for instance, your voice or your text if you're typing, the tone or voice in the rhythm, behavioral patterns and the intimacy levels, meaning the level of openness that the user have in the conversation, typing rhythm, time of the interaction, and many others. And if we talk about neuro AIs, which is a different type of application in the technology, but also processing emotional data, this is even more pervasive. Let me give you an example. There is a company in France called Habs. They are producing helmets and sensors that people can wear in order to have their emotions read by the system and improve marketing campaigns. I was at an event in Vivatech last year in Paris, and they invited some folks from the audience in order to participate in an experiment. So basically, you went there, you wore a helmet with EEG device plugged on you, and you were eating a macaron from the brand, the French brand La Durée, if you know it. And whilst you were eating this macaron with this helmet on, the AI that they developed was capable of identifying all of the sensations, feelings, emotional states and patterns that your brain was expressing at that very moment. And this data would be used to improve a marketing campaign in the future and advertising boards. So this is one example of a application in the neurotech field that is also reading emotions, and many inferences, as you can imagine, can be produced from this. So it's not only AI companions, which is the biggest topic here tonight, but there are also other AIs doing this type of inferences. And here I bring interesting information, data about children and adolescents, because they are a very concerning audience when we talk about AI and especially AI companions. So as we have seen through the Common Sense Media Survey in the US, 72% of teenagers reported having used AI companions at least once. 52% reported using them regularly, at least a few times per month, and 12 reported sharing things with AI that they would not tell friends and family. So you see that those bonds, those intimate bonds, are starting to be triggered as well and constructed between children, young adults, and AIs. The same here in the UK, interesting report of the Autonomy Institute. 4 in 5 young adults reported having used AI companions. Approximately half reported using them regularly. 50% reported feeling comfortable discussing mental health issues with AI systems. And this is what we see now. We see many cases as well of AI spirals. You should have heard of it maybe in the media. Spiraling is a condition that people can develop when they use AI intensively or when some vulnerabilities socially or psychologically are also present, in which they start to believe everything that AI says, and it can be really harmful to their conduct. There was even a case of a suicide, actually many cases. There are at least 7 now in the Court of Justice in many countries, including the US, in which we see those cases of harmful conducts by adolescents that are having those intimate relationships with those AIs. And why is it so emotionally engaging? Well, there are many scientists trying to respond to that question today, mostly psychologists and ethicists, such as myself. I'm also an ethicist, not only a lawyer. But we are trying to understand what is the root cause of the problem here in order to also understand what would be the correct model of regulation or the best model of regulation that we can have. And one of the answers can be that users' vulnerabilities are triggering this and making this very engaging. What do we mean by that? We don't mean that vulnerabilities are flaws of the user. It's not the point. But vulnerabilities are expressed in many factors and a combination of circumstances that can make someone more vulnerable than someone else. For instance, if you are a child, this can be a factor of vulnerability because you are still developing your emotional states in your brain. If you are socially isolated, this is also in the reports that we have seen one biggest factor for vulnerability, social isolation. Also, depending on your culture, you can be more motivated or more instigated to use and adopt technology in early stage or not. You can be perhaps participated in a parcel of the population that is not representative, that may be subject to some discrimination. So there are many vulnerabilities there, and depending on the level of vulnerability in which the user is put, we can have a more engaging experience with the AI. There is also anthropomorphism, which is the attribution that the humans are doing, in which we assign human capabilities to the machine. So basically, when the machine starts interacting with us, we have this tendency to think that it's human, that it can understand us, that it can really remember us, that it can really be conscious, as some people will. This is another topic, of course, but yes, this can create this sense of, okay, it corresponds to me in a level in which I feel understood, and perhaps this can be something human. And the third one, that is basically the subject here tonight, is the interaction design, or even we could talk about architecture. And I know that there are many developers here tonight and people coming from the technical ground. So it would be really amazing if you can share your thoughts with me, because it's also a way to test these theses that will be published. But yes, the design of these tools is also contributing to this engaging feeling of having an intimate relationship with a machine. So it's using a very interesting type of semantic that is basically constructed to make you feel heard and understood. And one of the things that is there in this design or architecture and that is causing this as well is something very interesting technically speaking, which is the memory. Most of the users dealing with AI companions, they report that AI is capable to remember facts about their lives, feelings, interactions that they had. So there is something in these machines in a sense that if AI is capable to remind, it's also capable to care. So people, they do this translation. It reminds, so it cares. And of course, when you are dealing with an AI during a long conversation, or if you are, let's say, some people say they have companionship with AI for 10 years using the same system. So of course, it will remember many things about this user. And the fact that those things are being repeated along the conversation or regurgitated in a certain way makes the user more engaged, feeling more heard and understood. So memory is a very important thing in this topic. But still, there is a big concern around this because even the technical folks are not yet capable of telling us how does it really work. There are many different papers, scientific papers with tests in the persistent memory of AI systems telling us very different things about how this memory is working. And I am not telling you about conversation history. It's not what I'm telling about. I'm not talking about the conversation window. I'm talking about the persistent, continuous memory in these systems. For instance, if you are users of ChatGPT, you may know the memory that is saved in the system and the persistent memory that it has. Also, the companies using or producing big LLMs, they are reporting and stating very different things in their privacy policies when it comes to memory. So we are not figuring out yet what it really means, how it really works. There is one study that I would like to mention here tonight, that is this one, Algorithmic Self-Portraits, Deconstructing Memory in ChatGPT. That is telling us, basically, they did a survey with about 80 users in which those users rendered their data, all the conversations and the memories generated from it. And in this study, they showed basically how the memory is processing information and what the memory is able to capture from the conversation. And what they are basically showing is that AI is capable of doing some kind of interpretation on those many massive data that is being shared through conversations. So it's not only a basic data collection, it's more than this. It's an inference that is capable of interpreting this data and generating some kind of identity to the user. So it goes beyond merely storing data or conversations, history. It's more than this. From these conversations, those researchers, they were capable of seeing that AI was capable of transforming the conversations into an inference about that user. And this is something very, very curious, because if you think about memory, and if you study what the privacy policies of the most famous companies of the LLMs we know nowadays are saying, is that basically the persistent memory is capable of remembering factual, fixed information about the user. But it's not really what we have seen in the studies, because this memory is capable of also inferring things. And what they are saying in this study that is connected to my thesis is that AI is capable now, because of the memory feature, to build interpretive digital portraits of users, shaped by algorithmic inference rather than explicit user disclosure. So basically, you may share, let's say, that you had a dream with your brother, and ask AI in order to interpret that according to, I don't know, some psychologist that you like. And AI may say, user is worried about the relationship of the user with his brother, something like this. So there is a translation, an inference, an interpretation that is being made there, and not only a simple data collection. This is marking something that we are calling a passage, a shift from two types of digital economy, and that we are seeing in the regulatory debate now. So basically, with the advent of social media, we had a digital economy that was mostly based on what the users are doing online. So where did you click? Where did you like there on Facebook or any other social media? Your browsing history, your purchases, where you went, the time that you spent on that platform. So basically, it was about things that you did in a fixed way during time. And this marks the era of behavioral data, mostly inaugurated with social media. But now what we are seeing is a different phenomena, which is a relational AI or emotional subjective AI economy, in which the emotions of people, including the emotional patterns that machines are able to infer, and all those inferences are inaugurating something that is different somehow. It's not about what the user is doing online, it's about who the user is. What is his or her inner life? So it's deeper than what we had seen before. Now the machine is able to infer many things based on those vast amounts of conversations that users are having. So AI is mostly about who we are and not much about what we do. There was an interesting statement by Sam Altman the other day in an interview, in which he said that the reasoning problem is not really the big issue in AI. The memory is. In that particular interview, he said that memory is the next frontier of AI and not reasoning. It's not about consciousness or AGI or anything that you can think of in that sense, but it's mostly about memory. And in that particular interview, he also says that it would be amazing to see one day this memory evolving in a way that perhaps it could remember everything. That's why we also see now that there are some companies already trying to produce this near infinite memory. You can research about it, but there are companies such as Personal AI, Pi AI, also a company called Rewind AI that was rebranded recently, in which they try to work with this concept of a near infinite memory, in which basically, if we get to exponentially, let's say, during the years, nothing could be forgotten because AI would be capable of remembering everything that we do. All of our emails, conversations, prompts, everything. And for many people, this is what would be amazing in a societal level. But in the ethical and legal domain, we also see many issues arising from that. Issues that we should discuss. First one, privacy, of course. But I would like to start with another question that is something that I ask myself a lot. Would we like to live in a society that doesn't forget? Let's say that one day AI can really improve its memory that much, just like Sam Altman had suggested, or many other important tech developers. This would imply basically that we would be the only ones, humans, forgetting things, but in another level, nothing could be forgotten. And as you know, in the EU, we have something called the right to be forgotten. Exactly. So, because people, they need some privacy, and they need as well some level in which their information is not exposed in systems or online in the internet somehow. But to the moment in which AI will be capable of remembering everything, we won't have that capability of letting some things go and forgetting, because everything will be registered in a persistent way. But secondly, privacy. So the continuous capture of the personal life. There is now an ongoing debate in which I'm also involved in my research, in which we ask ourselves if those emotional data that we see being collected by these machines should be protected or not. And basically, nowadays, this type of data is not considered as sensitive that you have here. And emotional data that are inferred is not necessarily covered by the categories there. So something that we wonder is if those inferences that AI can produce on our emotions should be considered sensitive or not. The second problem is the meaningful consent and transparency. Law always departures from the premise that people are capable of understanding everything. And if they understand, they are capable to consent to terms and conditions of use. However, when we turn to those AIs, very engaging, very supportive, emotionally speaking, are we talking about a technology that people can really understand in order to consent? This is something that we should also try to understand better in the data privacy systems. So, do the users understand? What does the system remember? Let's start by this question, because this is something very interesting to give visibility to. How it interprets the conversations. How are those memories used? Consent implies transparency. If this level of transparency about the memory, how does it work, what can happen to you with the continuous use, is not given, how can someone truly consent? So here we have another privacy and ethical issue. Emotional dependency. Also, we have seen in many studies users reporting patterns of attachment with those AIs when models were put out of market or suffered updates, including the GPT that we saw and many other models. Those users were reporting feelings of grief and loss. And according to the most recent psychological research, this is not only bollocks, this is really grief and loss. This can be proven, even to a legal, let's say, standpoint. There are lawyers now talking about emotional damage in this AI era, because we see that the experience feels real to the user. It's not something imaginary, and it's being triggered by the designs, by the vulnerabilities, and many other factors that we have been discussing. And ultimately, who defines who we are? If AI is capable of producing those many inferences about people, their emotions, their sufferings, their ambitions, in a way, what we are seeing is a new phenomenon. It is capable of also creating a certain digital identity for us. What the machine is telling about us and how it is profiling us, how it is understanding us. So basically, who is going to control the narrative about these digital identities, about who we are according to the lenses of the machine? This is also another interesting issue that law and ethics is trying to deal with. And the last one is the rights over algorithmic memory. So if you think about the memory as we have been discussing, there are many rights that people should have over it. But we are not yet sure of how to apply those rights. For instance, according to the GDPR, the UK GDPR as well, users, they should have right of access to what AI is collecting on them, about them, or any other system that is related to, that is collecting personal data. How does it work for the memory? Should we have the right to access as well everything that AI is collecting and remembering about us? This is a question, and how to do that technically, because we are not even sure to which extent this would be possible. The right of rectification, as you may know, according to many privacy laws in the world, people have the right to ask to rectify some information on their files. This information is incorrect, for instance, you have the right to claim the modification of this information. How do we handle this in the context of AI? Let's say if AI is inferring information or profiles that are not exactly true. And the right to deletion of those personal memories. Is that possible or not? How should we deal with those traditional rights that are now entering the era of AI? At last, we should think of how those inferences are really working and how they can change society. I am citing here this very interesting study that is called Schrödinger's Memory Large Language Models from the Hong Kong University. Basically, in this study, they are using the metaphor of Schrödinger's cat in order to say that memory in AI systems is functioning mostly like this metaphor or this example, because the memory is there in a certain way, potentially, but it can only be manifested in reality by the provocation of the user. So you need the right prompt to trigger this memory to come to reality. So if you think about something more concrete, let's say, the memory about someone particular, a user. There are many data and inferences there, but this is only a potential. With the right prompt, these will come into reality and you will really see the output of AI, and there you will have the written form of what it really remembers. In this study, they used Chinese and English poems in order to try to figure out this issue. Like they trained the AI system with those Chinese and English poems, and along the experiment, they wanted, of course, the AI to remember the poems, but what they understood is that AI cannot really tell you how many poems it remembers. But if you put the right prompt, you will see in the output the answer of what it really remembers, which is kind of similar to how human memory is working. If I ask you, how many poems do you know? Probably you wouldn't have a number. But if I start reciting poems, probably you would start remembering them. So it's the information that is triggering this memory to come into reality, such as a Schrödinger's cat, because it's there. It can be alive or dead. We don't know. It depends on the observer. And the issue here is that the GDPR and the EU AI Act and many other digital laws assume that personal data are stable attributes about individuals, meaning that the GDPR basically was created in order to regulate the processing of data, personal data, your name, your address, your habits, where do you go, the history of the internet, of your web, things that are fixed in time, that are factual. So we call it stable attributes, basically. And how do we deal with inferences? Because now we see something totally new. It's not only name, address, where you work, where you live. It's also anything that can be remembered from conversations and inferences produced on emotional states. When AI can remember us and respond to our emotions, the connection with the machine can become much deeper and more influential. The question is, how do we preserve our agency in this world where everything can be remembered or inferred about us? Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Anna. That was wonderful. Does anybody have any questions for her? I saw that hand back there.
Sorry, thanks. Great presentation. I was curious, where's the EU going in terms of regulating inference work?
Okay, that's a very good question. In my understanding, we are still outpaced in this. The EU AI Act makes a lot of assumptions on how AI is dealing with people's data and how the risks are being produced by these systems. But unfortunately, the issue is that this legislation that is supposed to be the most celebrated one and that is supposed to influence the other countries is still focused on fixed and stable information or behavior. For instance, the Article 5 of the EU AI Act is talking about manipulation. And it's basically saying that all the AIs that are manipulating users' behavior in a way, and they cite the specific example of using subliminal techniques for this, those AIs should be banned from the EU, according to the EU AI Act. However, what we see in this legislation is, again, this fixed mentality of the stable situation. Because in order to prove that there was a specific manipulation of a user by a system, you need to have an external observable behavior. And in most of cases I have seen of psychological attachment to AIs, we do not have exactly that. So I cannot really prove the causality between the user behavior to the AI that is triggering something. And also there is a lot of conversation around what is manipulation or what is emotional steering, because we are all doing that in a certain way. So we see marketing campaigns and many other tools that are used to instigate us in a certain way. So AI doing this is something very new. However, the problem with the digital legislation in Europe at this point is that, first, when we talk about data protection, we are still very much focused on stable, factual information. Second, when we talk about the users being affected by this, we need observable behavior. And sometimes we do not have, because this data is collected in a pre-conscious state. Sometimes you do not see the behavior manifested, but you know that the inferences are being produced and that the AI is giving such and such recommendations to the users in a way that it's steering behavior. So you need to have very serious scenarios, such as the ones I mentioned, the suicide cases of teenagers, in order to have something done. But do we need to get to this extreme of observable behavior in order to understand that those AIs are perhaps manipulating or steering? Maybe not. So this is why the mentality of the law still needs to change, to see AI more as the Schrödinger cat. Can be, there are potentialities, can be or can be not there.
I saw a hand back there earlier.
Yeah, so you talked about AI companions and adolescents talking to AI companions, emotional dependency, and so on. And also the term was anthropomorphism. So I think there is a ethical view on this, but maybe we want to get into that or not. That this could be either good or bad. But from perspective that different countries, if we relate this to how we're setting policies for social media, reducing our attention spans, and also like how children are growing up using social media, what is the concurrent debate on all of this? Where's the conversation at? What are policies looking at?
Interesting question. There are many ways to reply to this, but I would like to draw your attention to what you mentioned, bad or good, how is this going, in which direction. There are many interesting studies also showing the positive potentialities of those technologies. For instance, isolated people, they report a higher level of well-being after talking to AI companions. Also, it's a very interesting way to discuss sensitive topics that some people feel very uncomfortable to discuss with relatives or friends. I interviewed some people, men, from countries in the Middle East, and some people told me that the first time they could ever have a meaningful conversation about taboo topics such as sex was with an AI. Because in those patriarchal societies and very closed, some topics are seen as taboo and they can never really talk to their parents or spouses and so on and so forth. So this was a very liberating movement for those people to be able to discuss this with a machine, something that they couldn't do with humans. Thirdly, I would mention the fact that we live in this epidemic of loneliness, and also we see the spreading of diseases, mentally speaking. You see patterns of people are sick, that's what I mean. And in this sense, many people are turning to AI in order to enhance or at least turn things less bad. If you turn to the studies being done in this field, you will see that AI for therapy or for emotional support has many positive potentialities. Some people in the US, for instance, they report that AI took them out of suicidal ideation sometimes. So it's not only taking us that path, but also a different one. And when you think of countries in which the healthcare system is not working in a proper way or it's too expensive to access, having AI is still better than having nothing. So when we think about that, we are a bit divided, because in the policy arena we see potentialities, but we see also the risks. When we refer to AI, to children and adolescents using AI, this is another topic. I see the movement going in this is bad direction, let's not allow them to use that. And maybe you are following up with the current movements in Europe. There is a conversation in due course about age verification and which ages we should consider as able to use AI or not. So children and adolescents are a bit siloed in the conversation as the most restrictive audience. However, for adults, we see that there are ways to calibrate and to balance the technology in a way that people can still be benefited by it.
And then maybe just one last question. Yeah.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask a question. Given your legal background, AI is being used more and more in the legal profession, and either whether you're going to have a legal framework, we're going to have regulation like GDPR. AI is heavily used. So how do you make sure there's no bias in the actual decisions? Because of course, it's yes, AI can be used for lots of things, and I find it very useful. But when we're talking about suicide, then it's a different, it's a different urgency. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, that would be a more technical question. But in any case, bias is a big topic, because even from a technical standpoint, we cannot say that one AI is 100% free of bias. It doesn't exist. What we see many model and companies trying to do is balance this data with representative parcels of the population in the training data, so that it produces less discriminative content. However, it will be always there in a certain way, because if you think of society, you will think of bias as well. Even if we produce an artificial scenario in an AI for the training data in which we have a very balanced sample of all the affected population, even so, when it will be connected to the internet and it will be, let's say, dealing with several types of data that are coming from people, it will get somehow biased again. So we can never make sure that it will be 100% free of bias. What we can do is work with companies, of course, that are producing less biased AIs, that are trying to bring this representative debate into the data set using for training, but also the human revision. I really think that it's important that we are aware and empowered to do proper work as professionals, revising every output that we receive from AI. Because at the end, the recommendation is aimed at us, of course, but it's something that we are co-producing in a certain way. It's your work with co-piloted with the AI work. So it's your brain as a legal professional or professional of any field. So the revision, I would say, is the most important thing that we can think of in that sense, not only looking at the data set used for training.